Welcome everyone to another companion piece to the Ashland Field of Dreams documentary that was produced by David Carter. David, can you tell us about what we're going to see today?
We're going to see big league dreams today. Back in the 50s, there were several really good pitchers who did have tryouts with the major league teams. The one we're going to see first is J.D. Brown, a crafty left-hander who had, for lack of a better term, junk pitches. But he got out people a lot, and he pitched for Duke University.
Dave, I was fortunate, I guess, to have a couple of tryout experiences. Unfortunate in the fact that they never called me back. So I guess what they're trying to say subtly is we have everything we need, and just stay there by the phone. We'll call you if we need you. And I'm still waiting. But I remember Cincinnati Red tryout that I went to, I think, in Huntington when I was pitching, and I felt pretty confident because my record had been very good down here, and they give you an opportunity to pitch, 15 or 20 pitches, and then they'd say, all right, throw your fastball, throw your curve, throw anything else you've got. And I just remember the guy saying, you go ahead and throw your fastball now. And I think my comment was something like, well, I've done that. You've seen that. And so the guy was a little bit at a loss for, oh, okay. So I don't really remember what he said, but then obviously I didn't hear back from them again. And I have still continued to root for the Cincinnati Reds, hard as it is sometimes. Another tryout that I remember going to, Mr. Johnny Oliverio, who ran the shoe store down Carter Avenue in Ashland, had a son, Paul Oliverio, that was a pretty good pitcher. And myself, and I think Reese Banks, and Paul Oliverio went to, I believe it was Huntington. They might have been even Charleston, for a tryout with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Mr. Oliverio had a contact with the Pirates. So we went up there for a tryout, and my pitching was okay up there. But then what they obviously wanted to do was check your speed too. So one of the things they had was everybody get on like the left field line, and so just on the count of three, we're going to race and go about 100 yards out there. And so we were all lined up there, and of course I knew I wasn't going to win that race, but I was just trying to finish and do as well as I could. And then right out of the starting blocks when he said go, what I remember is taking about 2 steps and going straight down because I tripped on something. So as you try to do, realizing that you tripped, I tried to get up, and Reese said I went like a bunny for about 5 or 10 feet as he was looking back at me, see. Well, I never did finish that, so I don't know where I ranked on the speed skills. But again, the Pittsburgh Pirates never called me back, so those are my memories, lax as they are, of having a couple of tryouts.
With the pitcher, that when we asked the guys before the reunion, who's the best pitchers you ever saw in our era in baseball?
J.D. Brown.
No, it was never J.D. Brown. Simply J.D. I mean, it's like Cher. You don't need a last name. J.D. was the name that came out. And so here we are 50 years later. And I want, first of all, I want your secrets. As a batter, I want to know what went through your mind. Because you were doing mind games out there as a 12-year-old.
Well, first of all, thank you for all the comments, Dave, and I'm going to thank Gary Wright and yourself for doing what you had to do to put this together. Now let me respond to your question. I don't know if I was that smart, but what I did was I tried to respond maybe to what the catcher was calling and tried to have a good relationship with the catchers. We did try to take into consideration, even as early as I can remember, now, does this guy hit fastballs? Does this guy hit curveballs? What should we watch out for? And try to keep that in mind as we tried to pitch, but I really didn't have any sequence like, fastball, curve, change up, and then reverse it. There wasn't an actual sequence like that. Sometimes I'd throw 2 straight curves. And the thing was, of course, in youth baseball, and I think it's still true today, I'm still actually coaching in high school. Dave, I'm not a baseball coach now, but I can tell you that in Florida they have excellent high school baseball. And the big thing is not how fast you throw the ball or how big your curveball is, but can control the ball. And if you can keep runners off the bases walk-wise, then you're probably going to win your share in high school, because if they hit the ball, kids are such good athletes, see, they're going to throw them out at first base, and they're going to catch them in the outfield, and you'll give up some hits. But the thing is, you can't beat yourself by walking people. So my main thing was to try to not walk people, make Dave Carter hit the ball to get on base, see. And then I won some of those, and I lost some of those.
I'd like to see your grip on your that you had for your fastball and for that devilish curve.
He's just put in my hand a Babe Ruth baseball, so I'll try to reconnect back with how I gripped that for the fastball and the curveball. For the fastball, first of all, I gripped it across the seams and then released and let my fingers let the spin come out this way, and hopefully got it to float a little bit left or right. If I was having a good day, the ball would move a little bit, but I could control that. I felt a little better by throwing it this way. And it's funny, I always felt I was doing a good job if I had a callus on the end of this finger, because it was coming off the seams there. So fastball, that's what I did. Now curveball, all I did was turn it in my hand and held it like this, and then of course what I would do is bend down this way and get the spin off the curveball by pushing down off the seams with the middle finger like this, see, and getting the spin on it. I also had a drop ball, which I guess you'd call a split fastball today, and that's what the web boy from right here in Ashland is doing so well with the Diamondbacks, is his like splitter or his cut fastball, and I would hold it the same way, but I would release it just a little differently and would go straight down. And so some people, thank goodness, never really discovered that I had two breaking balls. Really, I had a curveball, and then I had what I called a drop at that point. So I tried to confuse them, because if they were looking for one, I'd try to throw them the other one, and then sneak the fastball in whenever I could.
While J.D. Brown was a junk ball pitcher that got people out with his crafty curve and off-speed pitches, we have next Jim Speaks, who was a really, really great fastball pitcher, and you'll see about his tryout with the Reds.
Okay, I had one year, this was I think the year that I graduated, I played with South Shore. They had a Legion team down there, and we played after our season was over. They picked up a team, and I played with some of the guys down there. There's Donnie McGinnis, the Spears boys. We played in a tournament over at Portsmouth, and I can remember Gene Bennett, which is a scout with the Reds. He played for a team called Deemer's Market. They had an exceptional ball team, and I pitched a one-hitter against them one night, and the next day or so, Gene got in touch with me, and there was three of us fellas went to Cincinnati with him. There was a Brown, I think his name was Darrell Brown, I can't remember the other guy, but they kept two of those guys and sent me home and said, you know, hey, why don't you try to throw during the winter time? So I proceeded to do that all winter long up here at the Armory here in Ashland, and a boy by the name of Ray Henneke. Ray used to work at the Y here in town. Ray would come up and catch me every morning, and we actually got through out of there because I come in one morning and Ray was throwing at pigeons in the Armory there, and he had busted a couple windows out. Ray was sometimes not in the best of health, you know, and he would come in there every morning, just didn't matter what he was doing, but he was actually throwing the baseball at the pigeons, and we got through out there, so that ended that. But had quite an experience there at Cincinnati. I was there, I don't know, maybe 4 days. Room with Don Pavletic, which was a catcher, and I don't recall seeing him, but maybe one time was all I seen him. The rest of the time was going back and forth. And Fred Hutchison was there when I was down there, and I got to throw in front of him. And he was always wanting me to throw a curveball, and I just could not throw one that was any good. And he would tell you, you know, hey, it's not worth a darn, you know. You need to practice, you need to work on this curveball. So I came back, and then after that, I worked out up here at the old Bluegrass field one day, and Johnny Oliveira took me to Columbus with the Columbus Jets up there. That was an affiliate of Pittsburgh, and I stayed up there and worked with them for about a week and a half, and just couldn't do it. So came back home, and Steve Gilmore and I went to Royal Grand College. Steve had got me into school up there, and I guess it was about the first or the only baseball scholarship that they had give out, and I did get one of those, but I wasn't able to stay there. I had some personal problems, family problems, and had to come home. And that pretty much finished the baseball, and then I got into some softball here in town. Played with the old Ashland News team. We had some real ball players. Had the Lynch boys on there, and I noticed in the paper last week Bobby was talking something about that us older guys just couldn't throw it in from the outfield. You know, we done threw them arms away.
Well, tell me about, you know, you had the tryout with the Reds, tryout with the Pirates, and you were a premier pitcher in this area. Then you went for the big higher level, and the dream died. Tell me about the experience of having those aspirations and falling short.
Well, it's not good, but you know you want to do the best you can with it. And I had a lot of guys here in town that did work with me, but I just didn't know exactly how to go about training. And that was one of the big things back then, that we just didn't have any facilities like we have now, you know, the different places that you can train. But it was quite a letdown, you know, to go and like I say, they had signed some of the guys that I went to camp with. I can remember going to several of the tryout camps. Went with J.D. Brown once, and they always have you run 40-yard sprints or something like that. And J.D. was having trouble with his foot or something, and we took off running. He took about 3 steps and just fell flat. And they didn't particularly want that, you know. They was afraid, but J.D. had a good arm. But we had, and especially me, had some real good experiences, you know, playing baseball here in Ashland. I wish I could have went further, but I didn't, you know. The old arm just gave out, and I just got to where I just didn't have enough strength to, and I don't know whether that was throwing too much or what it was, but the old arm just don't have it.
Now, I brought along a pitcher's toe plate. I called you to ask about that.
Yes.
And the whole purpose, I want you to talk about it in a minute, but you...
What is that thing?
It's a squirrel.
There you go.
It's going.
No, it's on the back of this chair.
No, it's not. No, it's a piece of paper down there with
Okay.
blue against you. No, he's back there.
He was.
So what in the world? You're not recording any of this right now?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you are recording?
Everything, of course.
I think I knew or had the idea that I was a pitcher when I got into high school, because I played in the 9th grade. When I was at Coles, I played high school baseball, and I got to pitch some then. I can recall pitching against some of the Huntington teams, and I really worked at it then. The coaches worked with me. I'm thinking Fred Anson maybe was the first coach that I had, because Larry Castle played and Herbie Conley was on that team, and I was sort of shunned by those guys a little bit. I was down there, didn't even know what they was talking about half the time. But those guys all worked with me. Jack Pope was catcher. That's way back there. But Jack was the catcher, and he would always catch when I pitched. That was one guy that caught me. Oh man, I tell you, when I got a toe plate like this, I got that, and buddy, I tell you, I was on cloud 9 when I got one of these. You can see that thing when he's out there on the mound there at Central Park. You knew you was a pitcher when you had one of those. But it was just an experience, you know, and I just loved being on that mound and you know, throwing and so many experiences. Being down here at Central Park, we'd come down here for morning stay all day long, you know, at this place, and either hitting pepper or either whatever we wanted to do, you know, it's what we do.
Discover your promise, your talents, your abilities, yourself at Ohio University Southern in Ironton and Proctorville, with associate and bachelor degree programs that prepare you for your future. Ohio University Southern.
We had another fastball pitcher in the 50s who went to a Pirates tryout camp named Glen Dale Easterling. And Glenn actually was one of two players who was invited to go beyond that and work out with a Pirates minor league team in Tennessee. Here's Glen Dale.
Well, two of us were selected in Charleston, Henderson, Selby, and myself, to go down to Kingsport, Tennessee for another real big tryout. And in Kingsport, the players we saw there were the Dominican, Latin American guys coming in. And they were better ball players than us. They were faster and could hit the ball. We were warming up on the sideline, and the old Pirates guy was getting us ready. We're going to win. Let's throw a couple innings. And he said, just want you guys to understand, he said, the difference between a major leaguer and a wannabe is when you step across that line into the main field. He said, you guys are throwing good over here, but he said, can you throw it the same way when you cross over? That got our attention. But those guys hit the ball. I was blessed to see Orlando Cepeda's little brother. He could kill a ball. The only problem was he wanted to pull everything, and they didn't like that. They want to be able to hit the ball. You got to hit the ball where it's pitched. And I was blessed after that. No other interest from that. But I went on to try to play ball at University of Kentucky. But before I'd gone to Kingsport, Tennessee, I'd hurt my arm in a spring game at Kentucky, and I couldn't throw as well as I could, and didn't know what it was one of those tears. And I stayed out of baseball for like 3 or 4 years, and then came out of college and came back here and played in the old softball, fast pitch softball here, and loved it. Couldn't throw. But after a couple of years, kept working, I could still get back to work and throw the ball. But that fast pitch softball here was a blessing for the city because there was big crowds. The state tournament here, when the Fords and Ben Williams played for the championship, I never saw so many people. They were everywhere. And the city really supported the fast pitch here. And
did you ever play like for the Ashland Merchants?
Now the Ashland Merchants was Big Ed and those guys, the Zeros, those guys were all, I watched them. I was a young guy when those guys were playing. When I was a boy, my dad brought me here to watch the games. He loved baseball. And I didn't know how good a baseball player he was until I talked to some of my relatives, but he never mentioned it. But he wanted me to enjoy the game. He enjoyed the games. We come up, and the teams we see like the Ashland Merchants, the Zeros, good semi-pro teams, and you always want to try to be like those guys. You watch them make good plays, and I enjoyed that part of my life here. And then when they started the Legion program here in '59, had the tryouts, and I was blessed to be able to be selected on one of the teams. Good ball players, and was blessed to play on the Legion teams in the '60s. And I remember playing in Owensboro for the state title. All the good ball players. Wonderful experience down there, but Owensboro was a little better than us, which is always running into better ball clubs. But it's the experience of playing with them. You know what you can do, but until you challenge yourself, you don't know how good you can be. So you try to do that in your life.
Okay, what 2 sentences, Glenn, of looking back over your shoulder at baseball from 50 years ago and how that experience made you who you are today?
I think baseball made you really deep down ask yourself to what can you do, and it challenged you. Things didn't always go well in baseball. You had even in your own abilities and the abilities of your own ball players, but you got to understand it's a team game, and you got to understand that that's what's going to be in life. I know that I work with people, and one of the best things is you have to deal with your own guys. And And I know one day in playing a game up here that our two coaches, Cliff Webb and Jim Sargent, were working and couldn't be there, and Larry Conley's dad, George, was our coach that day. And I happened to be pitching, and I was out on the field, and one of the boys having a little trouble at shortstop. One went between his legs. And George was worried about me. He come out, wanted to know how my composure was, and I told him, I said, hey, he's just having a bad day. We'll be okay. George said, okay. And you go back to pitching. I mean, the guy was doing the best he could. He was just having a tough day. It happens to you in all parts of your life, and you just have to learn to bounce back and enjoy the good things. A lot of people deal with the things that are bad in your life. But they're there. Always think about the good things.
Dave, we're going to go from fast to faster to maybe the fastest with Billy Lynch, who pitched for Ashland in the 60s. And Billy, they didn't have clocks back then, but Billy threw very fast, and anybody who batted against him would know that. He actually was pursued himself by the Cleveland Indians, who ended up drafting him in the second round in 1966. And if not for an arm injury, we would probably be reading and hearing more about Billy Lynch. Here's Billy.
When I was probably 15, I went to a Reds camp, and that's when I really started noticing that, you know, the major leaguers were looking at me. Went to Versailles, Kentucky for a Reds camp, and I was 15 at the time, and the other guy that at this camp that impressed people was Woody Fryman. And at the time, he was 30-some years old. He was just trying to make the big leagues. They came down to two guys pitching on the side. It was me, 15 years old, and Woody Fryman, 30-some years old. And I was holding my own with Woody Fryman at the time. And they came and talked to me, and after it was all over, and they said they were going to sign Woody Fryman to a contract, and they'd keep an eye on me for the next, 3 years or so. So at that time, I started noticing, that guys would hang around the ballpark, scouts, and we'd get phone calls, and a lot of letters came to the house. And through the next 3 years, through high school, you had a lot of people doing those very things, making phone calls, coming to the game, talking to you after the game, and a lot of attention, was headed my way, and it's hard to handle when you're that young, not knowing how to do it. It can overwhelm you at times. It was a fun thing, it was fun to be involved to the extent where big league teams would send you letters saying we're interested in you, looking at you, hope you are interested in us, things like that. And it really just got to the point when I was a senior in high school and finally decided that Cleveland was the team that was going to sign me through the draft, thinking all the time Pittsburgh was going to be the team because they were really the ones that pursued me the most. And Cleveland picked me in the second round of the draft in '66, and from that point on, my career kind of went downhill because I had a bad arm. But the involvement with the big league part of the game really started when I was 15 years old.
Of course, things they didn't know then, they know now, like pitch counts, all that stuff. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, I am sure that at the time I was overpitched because I'd pitch every time it was my turn, and they didn't have relief pitchers back then or guys that come in the fifth inning. You pitch the whole game. Even if you were ahead 10 runs, you pitched the whole game. So it was every time you went out, you pitched 7 innings, and that's what the length of the game was. And every other game, I was basically the pitcher. And it was not uncommon to pitch 30-some games in the summertime between high school and Legion ball, over 30 games probably. So I'm sure that not taking care of myself, also not warming up properly, things like that I didn't really think about because I didn't have a sore arm. Never hurt myself. Nothing was wrong, so didn't even think in that direction. And now that I look back on it, if I'd taken care of myself and done the right things and had a little more attention paid to the welfare of my arm, may have been a different story. I see it happening now where they protect these kids to the extent where they do have relief pitching in high school, And I can't say that's a bad thing. It's probably a good thing.
Good story. Final question. Back when you were growing up, you grew up here and there and here and in this park and several of the diamonds. We were playing games then, but we were also learning a lot about ourselves and about life. And looking back 40, 50 years back, what were the lessons you learned here?
Well, that's a good question. And I have had some time to think about coming down here to answer questions like that. The things that really stick in my mind was how easy everything was back then. It just seemed like everybody was not in a hurry. Life was slower. There was not, of course, you're protected as a youth from all the world events going on. But now, with the email and all the communication, immediate knowledge of what goes on around the world, you're involved every day with what happens in the world. Back then, you were isolated. You may not find out any drastic news for 3 or 4 days. But back then, you were just over here in the park, and that's where we grew up. This was our backyard. Central Park was our backyard. We never lived more than a block away. We lived on 22nd Street, either on Montgomery, Bath, or on Hilton Avenue. And on Saturdays, in the morning we'd get up, the neighborhood kids, there'd be 8 or 10 of us get together, come to the park and play ball. If it wasn't organized ball, it was pickup games, sandlot, and that was what we did in the summertime. Out of school, we came over to Central Park and we lived over here. And the things I remember about this ball diamond are the smells. The smell of the dirt, the smell of the concession stand, the popcorn being made, the yellow lights to keep the bugs away, the smell of cigars and pipes back then. The people that came to the game smoked cigars and pipes. And I remember that. And I remember the guys that used to line the diamonds. Billy Ray Jennings was one of them. He was a Tomcat athlete. And he would come and line the diamonds off and always did it to perfection. He had a routine that he followed. And, when you came to the park, there were big crowds here. I mean, it wasn't uncommon to see a couple hundred people here sitting watching ball games and cheering for you. And my parents were always here, my mom, my dad. And I can remember my mom sitting up in the stands yelling my name. I can hear it now. Just, come on, Billy! Things like that you don't ever forget. They just stick with you. And Central Park always has a special place in my heart. I see it today being used extensively every day, and it's just a great place for kids to be able to come and grow up and enjoy themselves.
Dave, there's a lot of great players that have come through Central Park, and we've talked about 4 of them today who really got very close to making it. And I think they're an example for a lot of people.
Yes, they are. Great guys.
They did a lot to enhance baseball in Ashland, and they're the kind of players that everybody looked up to, I think, as they were coming through. And they're the people that everybody talks to and talks about now when they talk about their playing days in Central Park.